everyone, and welcome to ARIRANG News live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. These are the top stories at this hour. South Korea proposes inter-Korean talks next month to North Korea. Seoul's unification minister says he wishes to hear a positive response from Pyongyang. The search operation for the missing AirAsia flight resumes on Monday. No signs of any wreckage yet, though. Help from the international community increases as well. 200 people are rescued from a Greek ferry that caught fire over the weekend, but more than 200 are still aboard, waiting to be rescued. But first, in what could be seen as the extension of an olive branch to North Korea, South Korea has proposed holding inter-Korean talks in the new year. Hwang Sung-hee has this story.
In a surprise move towards the year's end, South Korea proposed Monday to meet with North Korea for talks sometime in January.
The Presidential Committee for Unification Preparation officially proposed talks on issues of mutual interest between South and North Korea. We hope to heal the wounds of war-separated families before the Lunar New Year holiday.
South Korean Unification Minister Lee Gil-jae said the talks would center on the issues discussed by the Unification Preparatory Committee this year and its plans for next year, which marks the 70th year of the division of the Korean Peninsula. Some plans include expanding people-to-people exchanges through sporting events such as a soccer match between the two Koreas. The committee also plans to work towards holding family reunions on a regular basis and allowing for the exchange of letters. While some doubt a positive response from North Korea, saying the regime was never a fan of President Park's Unification Preparation Committee, others remain hopeful. Analysts say Pyongyang will want to make some progress with Seoul in time for the 70th year of their division next year, and that Kim Jong-un will likely express his willingness to do so in his New Year's speech on January 1st. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan will be able to share military intelligence regarding North Korea more easily starting today. Although indirectly, the agreement gives Seoul and Tokyo unprecedented access to each other's defense intelligence. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Nuclear bombs and intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the continental United States. North Korea has made substantial progress in its weapons of mass destruction in recent years, posing a threat to the region and the world. To that, a memorandum of understanding between South Korea, the United States, and Japan took effect Monday with North Korea's nuclear and missile threats in mind. It changes the way the three nations exchange their defense information. Before the agreement, Seoul and Tokyo shared their intelligence only with Washington. The MOU means that Washington will now be able to relay that information to Korea or Japan with the consent of the country providing that information. For South Korea, that means better access to Tokyo's advanced surveillance capabilities, which include airborne warning and control systems and Aegis destroyers.
By gaining access to Japan's state-of-the-art surveillance techniques, we are enhancing our capabilities.
The three nations had plans to sign a similar agreement in 2012. But that was scrapped due to opposition from the Korean public and lawmakers. To avoid pushback this time around, the agreement was scaled down to the vice minister level. It also states that the U.S. will act as a mediator when sharing the intelligence, as opposed to the previous plans, which included direct information sharing between Seoul and Tokyo. There's speculation this could lead to the phasing in of a U.S. missile defense system on the Korean peninsula. The defense ministry says the two are not linked, adding that South Korea is planning to deploy its own Korea air and missile defense system by the early 2020s. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Now, on this last Monday of 2014, President Park Geunhye checked on the government's key tasks for the year. The heads of government ministries and agencies briefed the president on how much progress they've made on a total of 38 projects, then discussed ways to better carry out the initiatives in the coming year. The Office for Government Policy Coordination gave itself a pat on the back for moving forward with the administration's four major policy goals, such as spurring the local economy by innovating the economic system. The Finance Ministry reported on tangible outcomes from efforts to reform public institutions and improve welfare for the elderly. In the meantime, the National Assembly plans to pass up to 200 bills during the year's final plenary session this afternoon. Getting the most attention are 3 real estate bill revisions that aim to stimulate the local property market. They include relaxing the price ceiling on private housing sites and delaying the collection of profits made from housing redevelopment. Lawmakers will also vote on a probe into the previous Lee Myung-bak administration's overseas energy development projects and on establishing a committee to tackle public pension reforms. In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The search for the missing AirAsia flight resumed as the sun rose this Monday morning. More than 160 people were on board that flight. So far, we're not getting any reports of wreckage being found. For the latest, here's Connie Lee.
As search operations continue for any sign of missing AirAsia Flight 8501, Indonesia's chief rescue official now says they believe the plane is on the bottom of the sea.
Our evaluation of the coordinates that we received suggests it is underwater, so our presumption now is that the aircraft is under the sea.
Currently, ships, planes, and helicopters are being used to find the missing aircraft after search operations were suspended Sunday night. Air traffic control officials say the plane went missing Sunday at 7:24 a.m. local time after one of the pilots had requested to fly at a higher altitude to avoid storm clouds. The AirAsia flight was flying from the Indonesian city of Surabaya to Singapore when it went missing 40 minutes into flight above the Java Sea with 162 passengers on board. Of the people on board, 155 of them are Indonesian, with 1 British, Malaysian, and Singaporean passenger, and 3 people from Korea. According to Korea's foreign ministry, the Korean nationals are a couple in their 30s and their 11-month-old daughter. On Monday, the ministry also said it plans to send a surveillance plane as early as late Tuesday to help in the search and rescue operation. At a makeshift crisis center in Indonesia's Surabaya airport, more than 100 distraught relatives wait for news of their loved ones.
We are very surprised and very sad. Our grandchild was going to Singapore for a holiday, but the accident happened.
AirAsia is a Malaysia-based budget airline that travels to 88 destinations, mostly in Southeast Asia. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And now on to another accident. Rescue operations continue for hundreds of passengers stranded on a burning ferry off the coast of Greece. Officials say more than 200 passengers have now been saved, but there are still more than 250 people aboard the ferry anxiously waiting to be rescued. For this report, here's Shin Se-min.
Italian and Greek military and Coast Guard officials are struggling to get hundreds of passengers off the burning Italian-flagged Norman Atlantic ferry that sits stranded and billowing smoke off the coast of Greece. Battling high winds and choppy waves, Coast Guard officials have a daunting task on their hands, and it's becoming a race against time given the fire and the inclement weather conditions. At least 1 person has been confirmed dead and 2 of the rescued suffered injuries. Passengers have been pulled from the smoldering vessel, though. The Italian Navy says little over 200 of the some 480 people on the ferry had been airlifted to safety since Sunday night local time. However, people left on the ship look likely to face a night of uncertainty and fear. The blaze is believed to have broken out early Sunday morning in the lower deck garage of the vessel. Describing it as one of the most complicated rescue operations ever undertaken, the Greek shipping minister said bad weather conditions and strong winds have hampered attempts to get everyone off the ferry. Some 10 merchant ships in the area have been assisting rescue efforts, with some transporting dozens of passengers away from the burning vessel. Local authorities say rescued passengers are being treated for dehydration and hypothermia. The condition of the ferry prior to this fire is also being called into question. Reports say the last inspection of the ferry found 6 deficiencies, including a malfunctioning fire door, as well as missing emergency lights and defective watertight doors. Despite the safety issue, the European Maritime Safety Agency says none of them were severe enough to keep the ship in port. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The longest war in American history has officially come to an end. The U.S. and its NATO allies held a ceremony Sunday at their military headquarters in Kabul, formally concluding its combat mission in Afghanistan. President Barack Obama hailed the end of more than 13 years of military operations there, saying the international effort in Afghanistan had resulted in destroying al-Qaeda's core leadership and brought justice to Osama bin Laden. He also honored the more than 2,200 U.S. servicemen and women who died in the war. About 13,000 foreign troops, mostly Americans, will remain in Afghanistan, helping train local security forces and assisting them in counter-terrorism operations. Over in Malaysia, where the country is suffering some of its worst flooding in decades, at least 10 people have been killed, while over 160,000 are estimated to have been displaced. Now, local media report that the floods in the worst affected state, Kelantan, are starting to recede, but many are still feared to be stranded. Prime Minister Najib Razak, who is facing public criticism for his absence during the calamity, said extra funding would be made for the victims. Thailand, in the meantime, also declared disaster zones in 8 of its southern provinces after floods killed at least 14 people there since mid-December. It's been reported that more than 180,000 households were affected and nearly 8,000 people displaced in the country. SK Hynix is a Korean company, also one of the key movers and shakers in the world's highly lucrative memory chip industry. But it was a very different story a decade ago. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us about one of the most remarkable turnarounds in Korea's business history.
For 3 straight quarters this year, SK Hynix reported over 1 trillion won, or roughly $900 million in operating profit. In the third quarter, it earned $30 for every $100 of sales, meaning it was more profitable than Apple in terms of operating profit margin. So, what's driving the company's robust growth recently? Take a look. The memory chip industry is all about adding a ton of a memory storage onto a tiny semiconductor. That includes DRAM chips for computers and flash chips used in smartphones and digital cameras. So, the name of the game is miniaturization technology and an efficient manufacturing process. And SK Hynix, the world's second largest chip maker, excels in reducing production costs.
Basically, DRAM is a kind of commodity. So just to be a low-cost producer is the most important thing. Basically, during the last around 30 years, SK Hynix remained as a low-cost producer.
Industry experts say the company's survival instinct has led to engineering innovations that pushed production costs down.
When SK Hynix was going through hard times in the past, it wasn't able to invest in facilities, so it had to operate its factories with very little money. But it was back then when the company accumulated its know-hows. So in terms of production efficiency, it has become the #1.
Established in 1983 as Hyundai Electronics, the company was pushed to the brink of collapse both in the wake of the 1997 Asian financial crisis and in the 2008 global financial crisis. The debt-laden company also suffered from years of a cutthroat game of slashing prices played out by more than 20 memory chip makers. In 2001, its creditors forced it into a debt workout program. The seemingly never-ending story of financial trouble ended when SK Group, one of Korea's 3 largest conglomerates, took it over in 2012 and renamed it SK Hynix. With the help of its new deep-pocketed parent, the company could aggressively invest in the latest production facilities as well as research, while the rest of the industry players were cutting back. Now the business environment for SK Hynix seems positive, with Samsung Electronics and Micron Technology of the U.S. remaining as the company's only rivals. The demand for memory chips is also growing thanks to the ever-evolving smartphone industry. Of course, a peaceful cohabitation by the 3 powers could end if the industry leader Samsung aggressively increases its market share or if newcomers decide to enter the market. For the foreseeable future, however, SK Hynix is poised to enjoy profits. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
The influence of Korea's top 10 conglomerates on the nation's economy diminished last year. According to Chaebol.com, combined sales of the top 10 conglomerates dropped by about $820 million in 2013 compared to the year before. However, data showed that Samsung and Hyundai recorded higher sales and net income last year, with their combined sales reaching $182 billion to account for about 4.5% of all sales by Korean companies. Market watchers are worried that wealth is being concentrated in a few leading exporters, threatening balanced growth. They say the government needs to come up with measures to boost the overall competitiveness of Korean firms. Now, the confidence of Korean manufacturers dropped this month. The Bank of Korea says the Business Survey Index, or BSI, for the manufacturing sector in December dropped 2 points from a month earlier to 73. A reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Ever since the Seoul ferry disaster in April, the index has remained below the average reading of 81 since 2003. Business sentiment was positive for exporters, however, as their ability to pay improved. That index rose by 4 points from a month earlier to 76 this month, while the number slipped by 5 points for domestic-focused companies. Despite the pessimism, manufacturers are hopeful, though, about the coming month. Their business sentiment outlook was 77 for January compared with 75 in December. Now, on a lighter note, the Korean film Ode to My Father, set in Busan's Gukjae Market, has sold more than 4 million tickets in less than 2 weeks. And what's interesting is that the popularity of this film is propelling the popularity of the market in real life. Park Ji-won has this story.
As its title suggests, Ode to My Father tells a story of a typical father from Korea's older generation through the main character, Deok-soo. After growing up during the Korean War, Deok-soo later gives up on attending college to support his younger siblings and heads to Germany in the 1960s to earn money as a dispatched miner, then to Vietnam as an engineer during the Vietnam War. After some time, Deok-soo finally opens up his own shop at Gukjae Market, the largest traditional market in the southern port city of Busan. The popularity of the film has led to a resurgence in interest in the market, which now houses more than 1,500 small shops. The market usually draws in 20,000 to 30,000 people during the week and some 50,000 on the weekends. But those numbers have more than doubled since Ode to My Father was released on December 17th. Many of those coming through are young people who want to see the setting of the film for themselves. Some are also looking to connect to the generation of men who lived through the Korean War of 1950s and its aftermath. Gukjae Market opened in 1946 and began to thrive during the war as it served as a central market among refugees who fled to Korea's southern port city of Busan. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
New Year's Eve is fast approaching, and I imagine many of you are making plans to spend the evening with family and friends. That's the same no matter where you are in the world. And our Im Yoon-hee joins us in the studio today for a look at the different celebrations that are planned globally. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon. Right, so everyone is getting ready to usher in the new year, and it's really a cause for celebration for many different cultures, but it definitely differs from country to country. So first, let's start with Times Square. Of course, it's an iconic place to celebrate New Year's over in the U.S. Now, the Times New Year's Eve ball will, of course, be included in the countdown, and it'll be making its debut after a recent makeover. The New Year's Eve ball got a minor adjustment this year, just days away from the countdown. 288 of the 2,688 crystal panels were replaced with a gift of Fortitude design, a design that's part of the 10-year series called The Greatest Gifts, according to Waterford, the manufacturer of the crystals. Now, the ball has a diameter of 3.6 meters and has been a tradition for New Yorkers since 1907 and is now considered a global symbol of ushering in the new year.
Of course, it's very symbolic, and some people line up days in advance to take part in this countdown.
Right. People are really determined to be a part of it, and it really is a cause for celebration. It's a lot of fun to take part in, but it's estimated that over 1 million people attend the event, so you can imagine how crazy it gets there. I've actually had friends attend, and they said that they try to minimize all eating and drinking so that they don't have to go to the bathroom, because you can imagine how crowded they get. But let's move down. Bottom half of the hemisphere over in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, another large New Year's Eve festivity is set to take place. Now here, if you thought 1 million in Times Square was a lot, 2.5 revelers are expected to flock to one of the largest cities in the world, to the iconic Copacabana beach for the countdown. Now, 2015 also marks the 450th birthday of the city, nicknamed the Marvelous City. Now, there are 3 major stages set in Copacabana, with 8 other large stages set up throughout the city. And starting from 6 p.m. well through the night, there will be samba, fireworks, and other celebrations.
And I hear the dress code. They have a dress code, right?
Right.
Dressed all in white?
So actually, it's, I guess, an unsaid rule to wear all white to these New Year's Eve celebrations. And there's a reason behind that. They believe that the white color ushers in peace and prosperity for the new year. So they want to start that off with the right foot, I guess.
And here in Korea, of course, we have our own tradition.
That's right. So it is, of course, a tradition to welcome in the new year on the beaches of Korea across the country. And in particular, I know Busan is having a festival this year, but all over the country, you can find definitely a lot of people flocking to the shorelines to welcome in the new sunrise, the first sunrise of the year. And they do that with friends and family. And so from the 31st to the 1st, there are a couple festivals taking place, like I mentioned earlier, in Busan. But you'll see fireworks and other festivities around the country as well.
And to accommodate that situation, public transportation will be available.
Yes, so they have adjusted that. So for the 30th and 31st, they've extended the last train to 2 a.m. in the morning. And they also have more trains more frequently throughout the day.
And also for those in Seoul, we can also go to Bosinggag in the city, in the downtown Seoul, where the bell will be rung on the New Year's. All right. Thank you very much, Yoon-hee, for taking a look at how people are getting ready to usher in the new year.
It's always a pleasure.
It's a cloudy Monday here in Seoul. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. We started off with a mild morning, roughly 3 degrees higher compared to yesterday, and we're expecting that to rise even higher as we proceed into the day. However, we're also seeing high levels of fine dust particles that are blowing in from China by westerly winds, and we can expect readings at about 3 or even 4 times their normal levels, ranging at up to 150 micrograms per cubic meter. The central region, including here in Seoul, will see the worst of it to start before the dust expands down to the southern regions by this evening. Now, taking a look into our week, our lows will remain on the mild side through New Year's Eve. However, the arrival of 2015 will bring with it a cold wave with lows dipping to -10 degrees Celsius. Now taking a look at the readings for today, Seoul will peak up to 7 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will reach up to 9 and 11 degrees respectively. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island will get up to 10. Tokyo hits at 8 degrees, while Mount Geunhye is below freezing at -4 degrees. Well, that's all for now. Now here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap from us at this hour. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.